Welcome everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to people joining in from various part of the world. Welcome to the session on risk quantification and private equity. We're very glad to have a partner, Thread Connect. Jerry has been kind enough to participate on this, so we really appreciate him taking the time out to join this webinar. Some housekeepings. We will be recording these sessions, so if your colleagues have not been able to join or you would want to share this further, this would be available upon request. There is chat available which will be monitored, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop those chats in. We'll try to answer them as they come, or we'll have a specific slot for question and answers towards the end of the presentation. Let's keep it interactive. We hope that this is not dead by presentation. We'll be trying to be as interactive as possible, and hopefully it's useful for you. To start off, just a quick introduction of your host. Jerry, do you want to shortly introduce yourself and also connect?
Sure. So my name is Jerry Campanera. I'm the general manager of risk and risk quantification at Threat Connect. So Threat Connect is a software company. We build two products. We have a threat intelligence platform, and then we have a risk quantification product where we put dollar values on cyber risk. I've been building risk quantification products for a lot of years. Love the space. Half my gray hairs are from work and the other half are from children. And I'm not going to tell you which half, because depending on the day, the landscape changes. But I love it, and I love, I think it's one of those things where we'll be talking more about this over time as more and more organizations start to, look to put dollar values on things. So thanks, Shriji and Ed. I appreciate you guys appreciate the invitation. I think this is a great topic. So thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Jerry. Ed, over to you, my friend.
Yes. First of all, thank you so much to Jerry and kind of our friends over at Threat Connect for joining us on this webinar. So Ed Starkey, part of the proactive team here at Thomas Murray. I spend a lot of my time working with clients trying to articulate risk in a manner that aligns to kind of business understanding. So the conversations that I've had with Jerry over the number of years that we've known each other now, maybe some of those grey hairs are down to us, Jerry. Can never be too sure. It is a fascinating topic as far as I'm concerned. The ultimate question within cyber is the so what. So really looking forward to exploring this, particularly within the area of private equity.
Amazing. Thanks, Ed. I am Shriji Doshi. I'm, like Ed, director in the cyber risk practice at Thomas Murray, part of the GRC practice. I've been doing this for close to 15 odd years. This quantification has been fairly close to my heart as a topic, and I have worked and interacted with Jerry in the previous organizations. We've had long conversations and a webinar also to go back. So really interested in sharing our insights. Jerry brings in great cyber risk quantification insights. Ed has a great insights on PE. He was part of a member who brought up cyber in the context of private equity at a very large private equity fund. He's been humble and not mentioning that, but he brings a lot of PE experience to this. So really looking forward to this. Hopefully you will also find it interesting. What we intend to do or cover today in the session is we'll try to give some interesting perspectives on background and context on why cyber is important. It would be something possibly new to a lot of people. As you might have already heard, cyber is fairly important. There are attacks and the risk is significantly higher. It's the boardroom agenda. But Ed will possibly paint a fairly new lens to the whole cyber risk point. Cyber risk. So very interesting to, as a background and context, we dive deeper into how we see cyber security risk at a private equity. Jerry will briefly introduce cyber risk quantification, conscious that not everyone would be aware of what goes into cyber risk quantification. So he'll provide an overview of what cyber risk quantification is and how it's done at ThreatConnect. We'll then hope to bring insights on how we believe cyber risk quantification can be leveraged within the context of private equity, and what would be our key takeaways. So over to you, Ed, to bring in some background and context.
Wonderful. So one of the things that we are going to be talking about later on is supply chain, the impact of supply chain risk. And I guess one of the challenges that we have as cybersecurity practitioners is articulating the impact of an incident or the potential impact of an incident. The CrowdStrike Microsoft incident that took place earlier on this year was something that we thought we'd just do a little bit of investigation around. And what we've got here is a visualization of sentiment of CrowdStrike, and this is pre-incident. And if you have a look at some of these topics that are here, it's all largely positive. We're looking at an organization that is viewed positively within the cybersecurity community, within the business community, and by that I also mean within the investment community. So you've got elements here of kind of threat intelligence, you've got market capitalization, acquisition, research, all of these kind of positive sentiments around an organization that's growing, developing, and investing in its product and services. If we can flick to the next visualization, and this is post-incident, and this is almost immediately after the incident took place. And what we've got here is almost the inverse. We've got a transition from what was positive to something that's negative, or at least elements of negativity associated with it. So Delta Airlines, we saw that they were a big organization that were impacted significantly as a result of the incident. So, having that organization and the negative context associated with the incident, associated with the business, is something that is significant. A visualization such as this, I think, is massively helpful when we're talking to clients and boards. But ultimately, the challenge of articulating the dollar value associated with this, or with similar incidents, is what we're kind of here to talk about. So we're looking at the evolution of the articulation of risk. This is one way of presenting it, and I think it's a massively helpful way from a visual perspective. And it works for individuals that are familiar with this as a concept, and who can kind of spend the time to look at what these key points are. So lawsuit. No one really wants to be associated with lawsuits unless you're a law firm. Losses. No one really wants to be associated with losses either. But risk quantification, I believe, is the next layer in representing risk and almost future gazing, or at least attempting to.
Thanks, Ed. Jerry, any more points for you to add on this visualization?
Yeah, I love it. I think it's interesting. So if you think about it, and we've had some fun conversations. First of all, I do love the visualization. And I think it's really important to look at something like this and ask yourselves, not go, hey, this happened to them, it can't happen to us, right? That's the worst thing to do, right? I mean, you don't want to sweep this under the rug, so you have to vacuum it up later or something like that, right? That'll be really bad. But I think the important thing here to think about is, how do you get ahead of the curve versus behind the curve? And so we're starting to see people even look to, it's funny because the CrowdStrike one wasn't a cyber incident. It was a patching regular software IT incident. We're starting to have people ask us to apply risk quantification to patch management. We make so many decisions on a daily basis as companies, as organizations, as enterprises, that have huge, tremendous impact that we do not understand. And I think you're heading down the right path there, and when you were talking about that, because this to me is the beginning of a macro trend. This is the beginning of a curve, not the end of a curve. If that makes sense.
Yeah, indeed.
Absolutely. I think it's important there to note that this particular incident, as you said, wasn't a cyber incident. We weren't looking at a threat actor marching around, leaving muddy footprints all over the network and the environment. This was an IT incident, an outage of a critical third party. And I think what we'll talk about in a bit is really kind of focusing on the third party aspect, and articulating risk around that. Wonderful. Thanks, Regi. So it's always important, I believe, to look at the broader context, the threat landscape, and basically the cold hard facts, and what we're facing today. So generally speaking, we're looking at a more volatile cyberspace. It's I guess an uncomfortable reality that organizations have to accept. There's a clear link between geopolitics in the physical world and the instability that we see within the cyberspace, and organizations that are being kind of increasingly attacked. Supply chains, complex supply chains, continue to be the source of attacks by attackers, and then the ideologically motivated threat actors as well. So organizations are being attacked because of who they are or where they're located, not because they have necessarily done anything wrong, but by virtue of their physical location, or I don't know, a previous charity that they've supported. They are increasingly targeted through no fault of their own, and I think that's incredibly important. When you look at the threat actors that are targeting PE, and this is what we refer to as direct risk, there's plenty of opportunity to cause disruption, interference, steal data, cause outages, cause embarrassment to these organizations. We also refer to indirect risk, where the threat actors could in fact target PE investments. So we believe that both of these categories of risk are equally important to private equity, and it's what makes PE quite unique. So the specific kind of PE risk factors we've got on the right-hand side there, you've got a complex portfolio of different organizations with different risk profiles within them across multiple industries. There's also a large focus on the SME space. It's where the businesses can grow. It's how PE can add value and make sure that there's a significant return on an investment that's made. But those businesses go through significant change when there's an investment from PE, typically. Yes, there are going to be exceptions, but typically. So there's opportunity for threat actors to take advantage. And what does this impact have on PE? Well, ultimately, it's potentially the viability of future fundraising. It's the loss of profit. It could be delays in the realization of investments. A significant cyber incident could cause delays associated with exit plans. You want to exit at the right moment, and any cyber incident could impact the business's ability to do that. So yes, I think context is key here, but understanding risk on those two specific lenses is absolutely fundamental. Jerry, I can see you itching to say something.
I am, because it's funny. This is a topic that's obviously I've had a lot of conversations. Threat Connect is backed by Provident Strategic Growth, PSG, a PE firm, so I've had some conversations with them. But I'll give you two things. One is people always think this doesn't happen to them, and there is like the poster child case study of making an investment in a company and then getting surprised about it later, and it costing you money, which is Verizon and Yahoo. And Verizon bought Yahoo. They're like, oh, we're going to buy Yahoo. It's all good. And they're all good. And then right before the deal closed, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we've got this giant data breach we didn't tell you about, and it's going to cost huge amounts of money. So there's a lot of money lost during that event. And so that's half of it. The other half for PEs is, as you said, Ed, like their business is to invest in a company, help it grow, and then to sell it so they can bring return to their LPs and their stakeholders. And that's great. However, if those firms get hit with a material cyber breach and they go down, your losses in effect double, because the company that gets hit will lose money, and therefore their future growth rate slows, or they have to overcome a huge hill to get back there. And that therefore decreases the valuation of that company. you're like, yeah. But look, from my experience with PEs, they have time windows on investment funds as well too. There's a rate of return, there's a period of return, and if you think you're going to have a company that's growing well and going to sell it, has a cyber attack, and you have to extend that time frame out 2, 3, 4 years, that changed it. Now, you guys work with a lot of PEs, but that's how I see cyber risk impacting kind of the bottom line. Because at the end of the day, it's all about the bottom line in business, and I think that's what risk quantification does. It brings cyber to that level. But Ed, I'm sure you've had kind of conversations with other folks about this as well too.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it in passing earlier on. The so what is so often asked by individuals in this space because they're so laser focused on the business. I think the perspective that you've given there in terms of delaying timelines, being hit twice, diversion of resources away from revenue generation or value creation activities it kind of hits the nail on the head. Generating value is what PE does. Anything that can divert resources or focus away from that it's a nightmare. It's the last thing that you want to happen. So cyber incidents have the potential to do that. Yes, there is an element of having to invest in cyber at the beginning, but what risk quantification does, I believe, is allow you to invest in a systematic, sustainable, and threat-driven manner, so that the investment that you do make does align to that broader value creation component that is so fundamental to PE.
Yep. And Ed, we've also been working with a lot of large funds, right? Sovereign wealth funds who look at PE as a partner, as an investment partner, and they are currently, assessing from a cyber risk point of view all of these partners into their investment decision making. So there's this lens also of you losing out on possible sovereign fund wanting to invest with you element.
Yeah, I think absolutely. That particular focus, I think, is growing. It's a trend that we're seeing more and more. Typically within the traditional kind of Thomas Murray sphere, we work very closely with the large funds, as Sariji has said, and operational due diligence is expanding more and more. And that's operational due diligence from the fund perspective into a closer examination, a closer understanding of cybersecurity risk within PE and how those individual entities are managing their risk. So yes, absolutely. It's been kind of, it's an area that's becoming kind of increasingly important. And I think really does talk to the viability of future fundraising.
It's funny you guys say that because you triggered something. So we work with a couple nonprofits with risk quantification, right? Some big name nonprofits, and their worry when it comes to cyber risk is not the cost of cleaning up or buying new systems. It's the impact of the future fundraising capability that they're worried about. And so there is and it's interesting because Shrija, you said that, Ed, you showed on your previous chart the reputational damage. Like the hardest thing to figure out, especially if you're trying to raise funds and to build up, for example, if a PE is trying to go after their next fund, and the only news is that, hey, one of my member firms got hit with a massive cyber attack, like that will decrease the LP. That will put a negative spin from an LP perspective on how you're able to raise money. We've seen it. And so that's a great point. You guys both said that. I'm like, oh my God, I've actually seen this happen. And so I think that point you're making here is spot on. It's a concern for PEs.
Yep.
Thank you.
Now let's see on how the cyber risk materializes in the context of private equity, and Ed has introduced a new lens again with the word proximity.
Yes, yeah, so proximity of risk. So we spoke earlier, at least in passing, about the threat landscape, and that doesn't go away. That is, it's not constant. It's constantly there, but it's not consistent. It's kind of dynamic and changing. So that is the background to which we look at all of this. But in terms of proximity risk, we've got P specific, and we've got a couple of examples there of entities that were targeted and impacted directly. There's also the third party risk. so the P supply chain. And within this kind of third-party proximity element, we've also bucketed the portfolio company specific risk. So any PE-owned investment that gets impacted by a cyber incident, we would say is an element of third-party risk. But then taking it a little bit further, and I think that's often where organizations stop, in my experience. Taking it a little bit further is looking at the portfolio company supply chain. And as we saw, the impact of significant vendors or key vendors being impacted or targeted is significant. And this is something that we really believe should be considered by private equity. Anybody that owns multiple organizations where they themselves leverage third party, there needs to be an element of visibility and comfort that risk associated with those third parties is being managed. Because off the back of that, there's an element of supply chain concentration risk within portfolios. And this is fascinating for me, but it's ultimately looking at concentration risk within those key third parties. So in the event of the entire portfolio, let's say circa 70 organizations, if all of those organizations had been CrowdStrike users and they'd been impacted by the Microsoft CrowdStrike incident, that would have had potentially had a material impact on the valuation of the entire portfolio. And as private equity owners, they're exposed, as private equity owns multiple organizations, they have, an elevated or increased exposure to concentration risk like that. That risk will exist whether it's been assessed or not, but it's something that we believe is becoming, and we're seeing becoming kind of more and more important to actually understand where the critical third parties are within portfolios and how the concentration risk is being managed. Typically within the PE space, there's a move towards known third parties. You share experience within the portfolio. You share your understanding with vendors. You might have similar challenges around, increased digitalization or aspects of digitalization or expansion. And there'll be trusted partners that individual organizations within the portfolio will naturally navigate to. Discussions take place between individuals in critical roles within these organizations. So within PE, we are seeing a greater element of concentration risk within this third party space.
Great. And moving forward, let's kind of see what is risk quantification and how we can leverage risk quantification in the context of private equity. So I'll let Jerry chip in, but risk is a function of likelihood and impact. So in order for quantifying this risk, there are estimations that an organization would need to make on the likelihood and impact. Likelihood in the context of cyber risk could usually be reduced to two elements, which is a threat attempting to breach your defenses and protective controls, and how vulnerable you are to that kind of attack. So that gives likelihood score, and then impact is usually the various types of losses and loss parameters. And so risk quantification is basically leveraging models to come up with a dollar value or a euro value or any currency value of that risk. Jerry, you are the expert on this anymore.
No, but I love what other people can say it as well too. I mean, you nailed it, Shriji. I think at the end of the day, I always tell people the thing you need to worry about why cyber risk quantification exists is because you want to know is there going to be a material impact on my organization somewhere because somebody can successfully launch an attack. And if you think about those three pieces of the puzzle, right? I mean, if there's an attack that launches that's successful against my environment that causes a material impact, I have two levers to push, right? I have a couple levers to push. I have to figure out how can I mitigate this? How can I ensure this? But most importantly, how can I prevent it from happening? And that's why this conversation around risk quantification is so important, because it's really not only about the quantification part, but we spend most of our time talking about the prioritization part as well too, right? The prioritization and mitigations. Look at that. That was Sriji, that was almost like you planned this, these guys, that was well done. But it is about prioritization. When we started building our risk quantification product, our goal was to be able to help an organization say, where should I spend my next cyber dollar? Which sounds so simple, right? It's just where do I spend my next dollar? We do this when we budget at home, right? Hey, do I want to buy this or do I want to buy this? The holidays are rolling around. Yes, I said it. It's November 7th. I brought up Christmas. But we're going to spend money. Like, how much do we want to spend? Where do we want to spend it? But we don't do that. And when you do that at home, you're thinking about it in the context of funds and what do I have and what do I need to do? We don't think about it the same way when it comes to risk quantum, when it comes to the enterprises and how we're investing in security defenses. I mean defenses in terms of people, process, and technology. So our goal with risk quantification at Threat Connect is really to, as I said, put a dollar value on risk, and then but to do it in a data-driven way. We support the three models. We have FAIR, we have our machine learning approaches, which are really data-driven, and then we've kind of merged the two as well too to do some automation around FAIR. But again, that's the what. The why is kind of what you're reading there, is to show, hey, you know what, you're weak at a control. If you fixed it, it's going to reduce your risk by, I'll make up a number, €1 million. Okay, great. But if I'm going to get €1 million reduction, and it's going to cost me €2 million to do it, should I do this? And the answer is, I don't know. But if you have that conversation, you win. That's a business conversation. I promise you. And I'm talking to the security folks, and the guys on the PE know this. I mean, we like I said, we're owned by a PE. I spend time working with our PEs. They're always asking about rate of return and how much money do I get? If I invest, do I do this? We have to do the same thing in security. And if you're a PE and your companies are not able to kind of have that conversation and say, hey, here's our risk, here's why we're spending this money, you as the PE are at risk, because you have to enable that conversation so that your LPs get the returns that they're after. And so this is why we built our Q. We didn't build our Q for that. It is a way we can apply risk quantification for the PEs in general.
I think that's a really good point around being able to have that discussion. It's a really, really good basis for a conversation, because the methodology is repeatable, it's defensible, and as you said, it's data driven. So it's very difficult to argue against. Yes, you can change the inputs, but ultimately, it's a scientific exercise. And I think that really empowers cyber professionals to have informed conversations with the business, which I think has been lacking for a long time.
It's funny, because I get it. I get in trouble occasionally. So I've been married for a long time, but I'm a fact over feeling kind of person. I'm a data analytics person. So I'm always like, what do the numbers tell me? And there's too much subjectivity in risk quantification. You have to remove the subjectivity. Now, I don't recommend trying to be completely analytical with your family, because that gets me into trouble at times. But when it comes to risk, you have to be as data-driven as humanly possible. And here's the thing. Every company on earth has enough data to start doing risk quantification today. You can quote me on that. Every company has enough data to start today. So anyway, I could talk about this one for days. If you don't go to the next slide, I will probably put the rest of the audience to sleep.
So just for the sake of the audience, FAIR is a framework for quantifying cyber risk. It's called Factor Analysis of Information Risk. That was also on the previous slide. And one of the key things that Jerry was alluding to is the platform of Threat Connect supports all the three ways in which an organization can model cyber risk quantification. So let us see what goes into risk quantification. How does it work? What is required to make it work?
Yeah, that's and so we just had a long conversation about data driven and how do you do this in a subjective, non-subjective way. And I made the claim that you have enough data to do this now. I stand by that claim. the way we've set this up, if you think about it, the dream scenarios, and I won't talk about this for too long because I could, but I'll kind of got to give a 2 or 3 minute overview here. If you think about it, the dream world will be able to go and say, is to have an actuarial table like they do for other forms of insurance. And go, hey, you know what? You're a company of this size and this region and this is your profile. Therefore your risk is X. And that doesn't work. And the primary reason that doesn't work is because there's the human element of the attacker in there really makes it hard to measure. And the variation in how organizations are set up make it, in terms of defenses of business, make it really hard to set up. So we said, look, how do you remove those two areas of subjectivity around the environment and around technically and then around the loss? Well, what you do is you actually ingest and you build models around three core things. One is historical attacks. What have other people done? Load those into the model. The second thing you do is you load in loss data. Hey, you know what? We've seen companies like X, Y, and Z lose money before. Load that in as well too. And of course, load in threat intelligence to make sure that you're looking at what's happening. Because again, you don't want us to tell you, hey, your risk is a million euros, but the likelihood of it happening is super low because it actually doesn't apply to you. So you load those three things in, you build a model, and you've got something that's pretty accurate right out of the box to be able to describe what could happen to an organization. And then for your suppliers, vendors, or company, you add in any of those those inputs on the left-hand side there where it comes to business assets, attack surface scans, control maturity. You add those in and you get a much more refined output. Now, the attack surface scans are great. I mean, those external scans where you're looking at the third, fourth, and third and fourth tier suppliers, as Ed showed on a slide or two ago. That's a great way to feed data in, especially if you're a PE and either you're looking at the maturity of your investments or you're thinking about making a future investment. Great way to do that. And because it gives that directionality, it gives that guidance for how risky they are. And again, that's kind of that left hand on the bottom side. And then you take the outputs and you make decisions, right? You take the prioritized recommendations, you take the loss magnitude and likelihood of breach, and you start going, do we have the right investments for our firms? Is there, if we've got 10 investments, which one is the biggest risk and what can we do to guide them to be better? Or if we're looking to make an investment or a purchase in a new organization, what are we getting into? And so by loading in those core model inputs, loading in the historical data, and then applying or overlaying on top of it a business context, you get a really accurate, really defensible approach to doing risk quantification across any of those models that lets you make decisions. Because at the end of the day, it's about making informed decisions for your security investments. And as promised, that was like 2 minutes. So Shriji, I'm going to stop talking because otherwise this is a passion area of mine.
So I think what is important to call out, at least from my point of view, is the risk quantification outputs. Traditionally, if you look at non-quantified cyber risk, you would see a high, medium, low score, or maybe a 5x5 table. You would only have that from a decision-making point of view with possibly the same company inputs. So you would have the same company inputs, and you are then looking at as with a not a quantified risk, but a qualitative risk, which someone would have assessed differently. So there is a lack of ensuring that every risk is assessed with the same methodology, and it delivers the same output. So the risk quantification outputs that Jerry was mentioning, which helps comparison, is a lot better with the quantified output. That's how we've seen it work in other organizations.
Absolutely. And that's well said. I mean, that's well said. And there you go. You can see some of these things right here. Loss exceedance curves. We tend to not talk about loss exceedance curves. I'll be candid. This is a debate internally inside the organization, inside of the community. The reason why is they're hard to understand. Like you have to get the words right. So what's interesting is when we first started building our Q, we put loss exceedance curves. We're like, oh, we're going to math you up. And then we have people go look at us going, yeah, that's really good. And then they pause for a minute and they go, okay, tell us what that means again. Tell us what that means again. And we said, all right, fine. So we ended up doing something that, I'll be candid, I didn't like at first. And what we ended up putting in our Q is put a heat map. And not only did we put a heat map, we gave people the ability to put a heat map with kind of the standard impact and likelihood matrices with high, medium, or low, or severity scales instead of dollars. Why we did that is because our customers and our advisors came to us and they said, look, some of our customers, some people are beginning the journey to risk quantification. and you overwhelmed them with dollars. So he said, can you help us? Can you meet us in the middle? Absolutely. And so we did. And that's that heat map in the middle. But at the end of the day, I think what you're really after is knowing that heat map is data driven, it's defensible. That when you're looking at risk reduction over time, like that's a standard chart that anybody can look at. You can say, look, so my risk decreases if my defenses increase. Okay, what's the ROI on that? That's a business driven conversation. And then finally being able to actually see what those improvements do from a financial perspective is huge, because it gives you guys the ability, the outputs of CRQ are what enable those decisions to be made.
Yep, indeed. The point that, I think there are few use cases for loss exceedance curves, at least, from my point of view, is that you are able to possibly have a pulse of your tail losses. So, what is the maximum loss possible? So you may want to consider, what is the one probability loss, which possibly gives input into, what kind of coverage you want from an insurance. So you can undertake some analysis, some inputs on the loss exceedance curves. But I do agree, if you have to compare two loss exceedance curves, it's not necessarily that straightforward to make a judgment, and hence plotting it on a heat map with the same likelihood and the impact that you derive out of the quantification element is a lot more palatable from a comparison point of view.
But I guess my reflection on this, and Jerry, hearing you talk about the discussions, it's an area that's evolving, and it's developing, and it's continuously improving, and it's not saying it's got all the answers at the moment, but it's saying it's working towards, I guess, improving risk and risk management within businesses.
Well said.
I think it's really important to highlight that. We're not saying that we've got all the answers, but we're saying, look, we think we're closer to finding the answer than traditional methods.
That's absolutely well said. This has been a journey for me personally, and then watching it evolve and grow. I mean, this is why the beauty of this is a lot of the conversations we have with people are collaborative. Like there's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of back and forth. I mean, we've learned things over the years working with our customers, and we've taught customers a thing as well too. I think this market is emerging and evolving and growing, but I don't think anybody can debate the need to know what's risk and financial. But you're spot on. Spot on.
Yep. Now let's look at how CRQ can be leveraged within a private equity. So we start off with the use case that private equity wants to quantify risk of its own organization. So what kind of inputs are possible? As Jerry was alluding earlier, all these are possible inputs. So internal control maturity, you can have it based on ISO, NIST, whatever framework you like. That gives the vulnerability part of the likelihood estimations that you could do. Then you have the vulnerability scans output. This is also something that can be leveraged. Now these are all not mandatory; these are optional. Then you have attack surface scans. So the products have the risk quantification products are now so evolved from a modeling point of view that you can only feed in an external attack surface scan and you can still get a quantified output out of it, which is great. Then you have the entire impact side of things, which are critical assets. So what is it that business wants to protect? Which kind of sets up? So it would be some sort of department functions, data. It can be, this can be set up in any way. Then you would have financial metrics, meaning that, what kind of revenue you have to estimate the losses. And then you have the various loss parameters that could be, you could have losses on the immediate response costs. There could be legal implications like fines. So there are multiple loss parameters that can act as an input into the risk quantification modeling. In my opinion, one of the key challenge is estimation of the loss parameters. In the absence of previous incidents, it's organizations might find it challenging to estimate. But as Jerry was mentioning, there exists tons of data either within the organization or externally that can be referenced, benchmarked to arrive at loss parameters for any entity. I don't know, Jerry, your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's funny. People always, that is a common question, right? What's the parameters and how do I enter all the data? And again, I go back to my earlier statement that you have a lot more data than you think. And I think this is where, and you both, Shriji and Ed, you said this, and I think you're spot on. When we started down the risk quantification journey, we thought we had to gather a ton of information from an organization to accurately model risk. And I realized there's a couple of challenges with that. One is most companies haven't had a loss before, so they don't know. And two, if you actually look at what the data tells you, you see that the data tells you when a company you can correlate mathematically a financial loss to a business asset. And so we started seeing different ways to gather information, because if you think about it, every PE has a balance sheet. They've got P&L statements. They've got cash flow. They know data, right? Companies know that basic business information. And if you can figure out a way to feed that data into a model, it becomes a heck of a lot easier, B, more defensible. And I argue C is one, because yes, you have the conversation about math, but then you have the question of, okay, but hang on a second. So you're saying that as an organization, the business assets we should be thinking about risk to business assets, not loss parameters. You change the whole conversation, because then what you do is then you get your controller, your CFO and your CISO and your CEO going, hey, we've got this, we're a data provider. We've got this large data set. What do we do about this? Hey, we're an e-commerce provider. We've got this large revenue process. What do we do about this? You get them thinking about security in the business context. So you're right, Shriji, this has been a challenging area in the past. And I think what we've had to do and what we're continuing to do is we're seeing the need to educate about how cyber risk truly is materialized, and then what that means to user organization, because that changes the frame in a way that I think lines up better with what the data actually shows us. And I think this has been part of the challenge. The evolution of risk quantification has been, let's talk math instead of let's talking data. And the more we talk data, and not that math isn't important, but like the data should drive the conversation, not the math, if that makes sense. Anyway, again, if you keep letting me talk, I will talk forever.
Ed, your thoughts on how one can leverage a risk quantification output from a PE point of view?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the heart of my experience of PE is that it's very, very financially focused, naturally, very data driven. And this it reflects the language of the business. So budgeting, cyber investment prioritization, business cases, ROI, all of the good stuff that you do in other parts of business that I guess typically within technology or cyber we've not been great at. This is the missing piece of the puzzle in a lot of respects. The risk monitoring, so doing, monitoring your risk over time, having an assessment 1 year and then an assessment the next year to show kind of progress and do that kind of retrospective look is again something that the output of cyber risk quantification can provide. And then of course cyber insurance, being able to make a decision as to whether to invest in cyber insurance, or what extent of what coverage do we need to feel confident or comfortable. So these are all elements that I believe are areas that private equity can use cyber risk quantification in. It's multiple use cases, and these aren't the only ones, but these are the key ones, I think.
Yep.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one, which is the indirect risk. So now we're moving from the direct private equity risk to the indirect risk from a third-party risk management. Now, someone would argue this is not PE specific, which is true. This is for every organization where this could be applicable. But again, this is an area that we've seen increasingly requests come in, and I've been chatting with Jerry over a year about this now, and he's also seen increase in RFPs around organizations wanting to quantify risk in the context of third-party risk management. So Jerry, your thoughts on this new world with evolution?
Yeah. I like this slide. I actually really like this slide. And the third and fourth parties at the bottom, like I'm having more conversations about this than I ever thought when it comes to risk quantification than I ever thought. And I keep going back to Ed, when you talked about that CrowdStrike picture as well too. Like the reason that I'm enjoying this webinar is the conversation's a natural linkage, right? It's not like we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. This is a perfectly in sync and aligned. So the CrowdStrike incident was not a cyber incident, but it was a third party incident that caused fourth party incidents as well too. I mean, you see Delta suing CrowdStrike down for $500 million or something crazy. The number of companies we're talking to who are worried about their third and fourth parties financially is huge. And it's probably one of the most growing use cases we have internally as well too. Is our customers going, that's great. I've got a bunch of third parties. I've got 100 third parties, 1,000 third parties, 10,000 third parties, and they all rate at a 700, 800, 500, A, B, C, D, whatever it is. You have to put the business context on it. And it's all boils down to that the same simple thing of how do you prioritize? If you have to worry about third parties, which ones do you worry about? And if everybody's got the same score, the score doesn't help. But if you're going to focus your business, and by the way, why I like this, and actually, having this conversation now, a business drive so if you applied risk quantification to your third and fourth party vendors, forget about risk quantification for a minute. What you should be able to do is go, actually, this third party is a huge financial risk because of their posture to us as an organization. Should we have a backup supplier in place? Should we look to implement and change our supply chain? Business conversations. We're talking business, not cyber. But in order to do that, you have to have the risk quantification. You'll see a lot more of this, I think, in 2025 and 26 as we get more and more interconnected. Like, Sriji, this is going to be huge, what you've got here. It absolutely is.
Yep, indeed. But there are few challenges in getting this data. Now, again, I think you made the point earlier, that data does exist. You just have to find a way to get it out. In the context of third parties, the internal control maturity may be a challenge because you may not get a questionnaire back. But again, you can rely on the external attack surface scan, financial metrics, loss parameters. I'm sure the product Threat Connect would kind of be able to kind of avoid, mitigate these challenge areas purely based on how the product has evolved over a period of years, since the data already exists at a comparable organization level.
100%. I mean, we have partners who OEM RQ in the third party providers in the space today who will OEM RQ. Because we've been through and I'm just giving you the loose answer knowing we've got about 10 minutes left. So I say that, like, again, I like to focus on outcomes. To get to that outcome, we had to spend months and years, not only building the product, but then convincing people and showing people of the math. And we've done the math. We put our PhDs and our PhDs and somebody else's PhDs had Greek conversations in Greek about sigmas and taus and deltas and gammas and betas and all that fun stuff. And everybody's happy. But yeah, Sriji, we've done that, and it's because there's I almost have not quite a 45-degree line, but it's a little above it in terms of the number of companies asking for financial risk when it comes to third parties in general. And so we've been through the ringer. Happy to go through it again as well too. But if I don't have to do it, it's my PhD math team that has to do it.
Indeed. Oh, we move on to Portco, the more private equity specific use cases, which is on Portco level. So we're gonna talk about two specific use cases. In this case, one is either during a buy side diligence or when you are trying to exit. In both these cases, you can use risk quantification to your advantage. Again, knowing private equity, sometimes the access to the target during the buy side DD might not be fully available. But as we've spoken so far, there is still a use case to leverage it for the buy side DD. Ed, your thoughts on this, on how private equity could leverage RQ in during DD phase?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's that pound or that dollar or that euro value that I think is absolutely fundamental here. We've heard how the model can ingest data, and the data is there. So the external perimeter scans, the attack surface management scans, these are passive. These can be done. These are done on a daily, weekly, hourly basis. This is all stuff that could be fed into the model. And to give a pound or a dollar or a euro value of cyber risk within the context of the deal, I think is massive. It's absolutely huge. It's something that I'm very passionate about. So due diligence is always about so what within the context of the deal. And this really does help support the practitioners in answering that question. So absolutely very conscious of time, but it's something that is key, fundamental, exciting, and should be considered more and more within this context.
And we apply the same third-party lens to the portfolio companies also. So on an ongoing basis, private equity can monitor the risk at a portfolio company level, at an overall portfolio level, to see where is the highest risk at which portfolio companies, where they might have to take a more hands-on approach. The relationship is with the portfolio companies, but it gives an objective parameter to compare your portfolio against. That's what the goal is. And once they are a portfolio company, there is possibility that you can get even more data from the portfolio companies to model into the risk quantification. So your risk quantification output becomes even more nuanced and enhanced, is how I see it. Ed and Jerry, any additional thoughts on this use case?
No, I think the portfolio thing is spot on, Shriji. I think that's the goal of applying risk quantification is to see risk in context. I think you said that earlier as well too. And context is king, right? So show me first my context inside my portfolio, and then let me dive deeper. But that portfolio was huge. We spent a lot of years building that, and I love that you guys see that value as well too. Sorry, go ahead.
It allows you to compare apples and pears. Like it answers the age-old question of, how do I compare two very different looking investments, and it allows you to prioritize which assets, which organizations you should be more concerned about.
They're all fruit salad at the end of the day, and it's all fruit salad.
I know all portfolio companies are equal, but some are more equal than others. So it's just an element. Prioritization is key. Prioritization in terms of investment, in terms of time, and any other resource that you want to kind of throw at it. So this allows you to do it. And it's really powerful because you can provide it back to portfolio companies themselves as well. So it's not just about private equity getting value, but it's about their investments getting the value and being able to multiply that value creation effect.
Amazing. Last 4 minutes left on the clock. Passing comments, key takeaways for you, Ed?
Cyber risk quantification is something that I think to a lot of individuals could be quite scary. It's something that is on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge of cyber risk management. But it could be leveraged. It could be leveraged by PE for internal risk management or investment decisions. It's something that can be done with very little data, as we saw earlier on. The extent, we'd always encourage more data over less data, but ultimately, if you've got something, and there's always the ability to get something, you can do this. and it adds value. The extent to which you can get data is, as you said, point 3 is around the approach that the private equity house might take to actually management. And if they're more hands-on, you can get more data, and therefore the modeling becomes more accurate. And the last point really is around the regulatory side of things. So we are seeing more and more and more regulators insisting upon organizations placing a dollar, pound, euro value against incidents. And this is something that allows you to do that. It not only allows you to do it, but it allows individuals within the organization to change their mindset from looking at risk from a red, amber, green, quantify, to pound and dollar. So in the event that something does happen, the organization is able to respond in a mature manner to their in line with their regulatory obligations.
Thanks, Ed. Jerry, from your point of view, any passing last comments on what we've spoken so far? Your thoughts?
I think you guys have all said it well. I think Ed, you said it well as well too. What I think, so over the years I've learned that Dora was not just an explorer who got a backpack and a friend named Boots. I learned what it was to Europeans, which is kind of cool. And I tell people all the time when they ask, I'm like, this is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of the story. When we talk about security, we still talk about it in security terms instead of business terms. When IT got started, that we talked about it in technical terms. Now it's a fully business run function. This will be the same thing when it comes to security, and CRQ is going to be at the forefront of this. And I actually think the PEs and kind of how the investments are made, and I get to learn from both sides of the fence here. I think this is going to be incredibly important for PEs to wrap their heads around and to get ahead of, because it's we've seen a lot of damage that can be done. So I think you guys nailed it here, and I'm very excited to see how PEs start to really. I think they're going to adopt this quickly, but I think they're going to start driving the conversation, especially through that third piece there you talked about, Shriji, which is the portfolio view. That portfolio view for a PE is just because you want to know not only what my current risk is, but if I add something to the portfolio, what does that do for my risk? Standard business conversations. We're going to do the same thing in security, and risk qualification is going to be a key part of it.
Yep. From my point of view, I think, Jerry, what you mentioned hits the nail. That cyber, the regulations and how it has evolved is not leave cyber risk to the IT folks or the security folks, bring it more to business. And RQ is going to be one of the main tools to kind of articulate it in business terms. So this is just the start, as you mentioned it. So yeah, I think on that note, we are at the top of the hour. Again, Jerry, thank you so much as always. Insightful, fun. It was great to have you on our webinar. We really appreciate you giving us your time.
You guys are great. I'm a huge fan of what you guys are doing at Thomas Murray, which is why I like partnering. I like working with you guys, and whatever we can do to help is great. So thank you guys for inviting me. I enjoyed it as well too.
Thanks, Jen.
We didn't have time for Q&As, and I've not seen any question come on the chat. But if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We are more than happy to answer them back to you. Thank you so much for joining on this webinar. Hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to welcoming you on another webinars. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.